I sold my land to pay for her father's treatment, but when I lost everything she called me incapable and walked away. My name is Jake and I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I couldn't handle being called incapable by the woman I loved. It started 2 years ago. Sarah and I had been together for 5 years, engaged for 1. She was everything, smart, kind, had this laugh that made me forget every bad day I'd ever had. We weren't rich, but we were building something. I had inherited 40 acres of farmland from my grandfather, and we planned to build our dream house there after the wedding. Then her father got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The insurance barely covered anything. The experimental treatment that might give him 6 more months. $180,000. Sarah cried every night for 2 weeks straight. I watched the woman I loved crumble and I knew what I had to do. I sold the land. 40 acres of my family's legacy gone in 30 days. I didn't tell Sarah until after the papers were signed. When I handed her the check, she sobbed in my arms and called me her hero. That moment felt like the highest point of my entire. Her father lived 8 more months. Good months. He walked her down the practice aisle at our wedding rehearsal venue viewing. He told me I was the son he never had. He died peacefully surrounded by family, because of that treatment, but the money was gone. All of it, and the wedding we'd planned, the house we dreamed about, the future we'd mapped out, it all crumbled with our savings account. Sarah tried to be supportive at first. We moved into a tiny apartment. I worked 2 jobs trying to rebuild what we'd lost, but I could see it in her eyes, the disappointment, the resentment, the slow realization that maybe she'd settled for someone who couldn't provide that she wanted. The fight started small. Why couldn't I get a better paying job? Why didn't I have a backup plan? Why was I so naive about money? Each argument chipped away at my confidence until I started believing maybe she was right. Maybe I was just some small town guy who'd never amount to anything. Then came that Tuesday night in March. We'd been arguing about the electric bill again. I'd picked extra shifts at the warehouse, but it wasn't enough. She looked at me with these tired, frustrated eyes and said the words that broke something inside me. Jake, I love but are just incapable. I need a partner, not another person I have to take care of. Incapable. The word hit me like a truck. Here I was, working 70-hour weeks, having sacrificed my inheritance for her family, and she called me incapable. I told her I needed air and drove to Murphy's bar downtown. I'd never been much of a drinker, but that night I wanted to disappear into a bottle and forget that the woman I'd given everything for thought I wasn't enough. That's where I met Lisa. She was a paralegal recently divorced, sitting alone at the end of the bar with a Manhattan and a book. When she looked and smiled, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, desired. Wantable. We talked for 3 hours. She laughed at my jokes. She didn't know about my failures, my empty bank account, my crumbling engagement. To her I was just Jake, not capable Jakey. Or, broke Jake. Or disappointing Jake. When she asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime, every rational part of my brain screamed no. I was engaged, I loved Sarah. This was just a moment of weakness. But then I heard Sarah's voice in my head, incapable. I said yes. The coffee date turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long phone conversations. Phone conversations turned into meeting, just as friends, every few weeks. Lisa made me feel like the man I used to be, confident, funny, worth something. I told it was innocent. We were just talking. Sarah was so focused on her grief and our financial stress that she barely noticed when I came home late or spent hours on my phone. I convinced this friendship was keeping me sane, keeping our relationship together. But I knew what I was really doing. I was building an escape route. The first time Lisa I should have stopped it. We were in her car after another innocent dinner, and she leaned over and pressed her lips against mine. For 30 seconds I heard back. For 30 seconds I wasn't the failure who couldn't pay his bills, or the disappointment who'd ruined his fiancée's future. I was just a man who was wanted. I pulled away, told her I couldn't, that I was engaged. She apologized, said she understood, but the damage was done. The line was crossed. We both knew where this was heading. 3 weeks later, after another with Sarah about money, about the future, about how I'd destroyed our stability, I found at Liz's apartment. She opened a bottle of. We sat on her couch, and she listened while I unloaded every frustration, every moment of feeling like I wasn't enough. And when she took my hand and told me I deserved better, I didn't pull away. I stayed the night. The next morning, driving home to Sarah, I felt like I was going to. What had I done? How had I let it get this far? I'd betrayed everything I claimed to believe in, everything I'd built with the woman I was supposed to marry. But when I walked into our apartment and Sarah barely looked from her laptop, still treating me like I was some burden she had to manage, part of me felt justified into this. She'd made me feel so small, so that I'd sought validation anywhere I could find it. That's the lie I told for the next 2 months as the affair continued. I met Lisa twice a week. Sometimes it was physical, sometimes we just talked. She never made me feel guilty or ashamed. She told me I was generous for what I'd done for Sarah's father, that Sarah should appreciate my sacrifice instead of resenting it. Everything Lisa said felt like medicine for wounds I didn't even know were festering. But the guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't look Sarah in the eyes. I flinched when she touched me. I started picking fights so I'd have excuses to leave the apartment and see Lisa. I was becoming a stranger to, and I hated what I was turning into. The breaking point came on a Friday in June. Sarah had gotten a promotion at work, not huge money, but enough to take some pressure off. She came home excited, talking about how maybe we could start saving again, how things were finally looking. She me and whispered, "I'm sorry I've been so lately. I know been trying so hard, and I appreciate everything do." Standing there in our tiny kitchen, holding the woman I'd promised to marry, knowing I had a date with Lisa in 2 hours, I realized I'd become the villain in my own story. Sarah wasn't perfect, but she was grieving and stressed, and trying to build a future with someone who was lying to her face every single day. I should have ended it with Lisa right then. Should have come clean, begged for forgiveness, fought for my relationship. Instead, I went to Lisa's apartment and told her I was thinking about leaving Sarah. The words came out before I could stop them, and Lisa's face lit in a way that terrified me. She started talking about us being together, about how much happier I'd be, about how Sarah clearly didn't deserve me. Sitting there, listening to her plan our future while Sarah was at home probably picking out paint colors for a house we'd never build, I felt like I was drowning in my own choices. but I was too weak to swim back to shore. That weekend I told Sarah I needed space to figure things out. The confusion in her eyes nearly broke me, but I was so tangled in my own self-pity and justifications that I couldn't see past my own pain. I moved in with Lisa temporarily, telling it was just until I could think clearly. I never got the chance to think clearly again. If read part 1. No, I'm the guy who way a 5-year relationship because I couldn't handle being called incapable. Well, it gets worse. So much worse. Living with Lisa felt like playing house with someone else's. Her apartment was everything Sarah and I could afford. Granite countertops, a walk-in closet, a view of the city. For 3 weeks I pretended this was what happiness looked like. Lisa treated me like I was some prize she'd won. She cooked elaborate dinners, bought me clothes I couldn't afford, introduced me to her friends as her boyfriend. She never asked about Sarah, never questioned whether what we were doing was right. In her mind we were the perfect couple who'd found each other. But I couldn't sleep. Every night, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah alone in our apartment, probably wondering what she'd done wrong. I drafted 100 texts apologizing, explaining, begging her to talk to me. I never sent a single one. The coward in me hoped she'd just move on and I wouldn't have to face what I'd done. 3 weeks into my new Sarah showed at Lisa's building. I was coming back from a job interview when I saw her sitting on the steps, still wearing her work uniform from the diner, where she'd picked a second job to help with our bills. She looked smaller than I remembered, like grief had physically shrunk her. Jake. Her voice was barely a whisper. I need to understand what happened. Standing there on the sidewalk, looking at the woman I'd promised to marry, I had 2 choices. I could tell her the truth and deal with the consequences, or I could lie and protect the fantasy I'd built with Lisa. I chose to lie. I told her I'd fallen out of love, that we'd grown apart, that maybe we were too young when we got engaged. Generic breakup language that sounded hollow even to me. Sarah listened with this blank expression, like she was processing something that didn't make sense. When I finished my rehearsed speech, she asked the question that still haunts me. Is there someone else? I looked into the eyes of the woman who'd stood by me through everything, whose father had called me son, whose future I'd promised to share, and I lied again. No. This is just about us. She nodded slowly, like she was filing that information somewhere safe. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out my grandmother's engagement ring, the one family heirloom I hadn't sold. I've been wearing this for a year, she said, sliding it off her finger. I kept thinking if I was patient enough, good enough, supportive enough, to remember why proposed to me. She pressed the ring into my palm. Her hands were shaking. I guess I wasn't enough. The ring felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I wanted to throw it back at her, to tell her she was wrong, that she was everything and I was the problem. Instead, I stood there like a statue while she walked away. That night Lisa found me sitting on her balcony still holding the ring. Did the right thing, she said, wrapping her arms around me. She'll be better off with that holding her back. Holding her back, as if I hadn't sacrificed everything I had for her family. As if I hadn't worked into the ground trying to rebuild what we'd lost. Lisa's casual dismissal of Sarah should have been a red flag the size of Texas. Instead I let her convince me that Sarah was the villain in this story. 2 months passed. I got a better paying job at Lisa's law firm as a paralegal assistant. We moved in together officially. Her friends welcomed me into their group, successful professionals who made jokes about settling and trading. I started believing maybe I'd made the right choice. Then I ran into Sarah's best friend Emma at the grocery store. Emma had been my friend too once. We double dated, spent holidays together, talked about being in each other's weddings. When she saw me her face went through about 10 different emotions before settling on pure disgust. Piece of trash. She said loud enough for half the store to hear. Do you have any idea what did to her? I tried to walk away, but Emma followed me down the cereal aisle, her voice getting louder with every word. She had to move back in with her mom because she couldn't afford the apartment alone. She's working 3 jobs trying to pay off the credit card debt from her father's medical bills, the ones left over after played hero with land money. My went cold. What credit card debt? The $15,000 she racked on top of what paid genius. Did think, one earned Eddie Zausen covered everything. The travel costs the experimental insurance wouldn't cover, the time off work to be with him. I hadn't known. Sarah had never told me about the credit cards. She'd handled all the medical finances while I dealt with selling the land. Emma stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more than her shouting. But here's the best part. She blamed herself for calling incapable. She's been in therapy trying to figure out how she drove away, with her grief and stress. She thinks breakup was her fault. The grocery store felt like it was tilting around me. Sarah was in therapy, blaming herself for my betrayal while I was playing house with another woman. She asked me not to, Emma continued. Said we're grieving too. That losing grandfather Lane must have been traumatic. Even after abandoned her she was still making excuses for Emma picked her cart and started to walk away then turned back one more time. Oh and Jake, she's pregnant. The world stopped. What? 7 weeks. Found out 2 weeks ago. She's keeping it. Emma's smile was sharp as a blade. Congratulations daddy. Hope new girlfriend likes children. I stood there in the cereal aisles for 20 minutes after Emma left, my mind trying to process what I just learned. Sarah was pregnant. With my baby. And I'd walked away from her while she was carrying my child. That night I called Sarah 17 times. She didn't answer. I drove to her mom's house and sat outside for 3 hours, trying to work the courage to knock on the door. I never did. Instead I went home to Lisa and told her everything. Her reaction wasn't what I expect, no sympathy, no concern for Sarah or the baby, just cold calculation. So what's plan? She asked like we were discussing a work problem. I need to go to her. I need to fix this. Lisa laughed, actually laughed. Fix what exactly? Think she's gonna take back now. Think she wants to raise a baby with someone who abandoned her when things got tough. Her words hit like physical blows, but she wasn't done. Face reality, Jake. Made choice. We made our choice. Can't go running back every time, feel guilty. What kind of man does that make? She was right and that's what made it so terrible. I had made my choice. I'd chosen Lisa over Sarah, comfort over commitment, my wounded pride over the woman who'd loved me enough to forgive my failures. But now there was a baby. That weekend, I finally worked the courage to go to Sarah's mom's house. Mrs. Chen had always liked me, treated me like family. I figured she'd at least let me explain. She opened the door, took one look at me, and her face went cold as winter. She's not here. Mrs. Chen, please. I know about the baby. I need to talk to her. Now want to talk. Her voice could have glass. Where were when she was throwing every morning for 2 weeks, thinking it was stress? Where were when she had to take 3 pregnancy tests because she couldn't believe she was having a baby with someone who'd already left? I tried to speak, but she held her hand. She cried for 2 months straight. 2 months, I had to watch my daughter, who'd already lost her father, lose the man she thought she was going to marry. Do you know what that's like for a mother? Mrs. Chen stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. She told me what said. That fell out of love, that grew apart. But Emma told me the truth about new girlfriend. My heart stopped. Mrs. Chen, I don't. Her voice was barely controlled fury. Don't dare try to explain. My daughter is 7 months pregnant, working herself to prepare for a baby she's raising alone, and want to waltz back into her because finally grew a conscience. She was 7 months pregnant. I'd been gone for over 6 months living with Lisa while Sarah grew bigger with my child alone. I want to be there for the baby, I managed to say. The baby, Mrs. Chen's laugh was bitter. Mean daughter. Yes, it's a girl. Sarah's been talking to her every night, telling her bedtime stories, playing music for her. She's already more of a parent than I'll ever be. A daughter. I was going to have a daughter. Sarah asked me to give this if ever came around. Mrs. Chen handed me an envelope. She wrote it 3 months ago, when she finally accepted that weren't coming back. I opened the letter with trembling hands. Jake, if we're reading this, it means found out about the baby. I hope we're happy with new. I hope she was worth it. I'm not going to keep our daughter from if want to be part of her. But I have conditions. Don't get to drift in and out when it's convenient. Don't get to confuse her by treating me like we might get back together someday. And don't get to bring girlfriend around my child until she's old enough to understand who she is. I named her Emma Grace. Emma, my best friend who helped me through the worst months of my Grace after grandmother, because despite everything, she deserves to know where she comes from. I don't, Jake. I just don't trust anymore. And I won't let break our daughter's heart the way broke mine. Sarah, I read the letter 5 times standing on that porch. Mrs. Chen watched me with arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to prove I was exactly the disappointment she thought I was. She's having the baby at Memorial Hospital, she finally said. Room 314. She goes into labor. That's where she'll be. What do with that information is to, 2 weeks later, at 30:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, Emma Grace was born. I knew because I'd been sleeping in my car in the hospital parking lot for 3 days waiting. This is the end of my story. The part where I learned that some mistakes don't get fixed, they just get lived with forever. I was sleeping in my car in the hospital parking lot when my phone buzzed at 30:47 a.m. A text from Mrs. Chen. It's time. I ran through those hospital corridors like my depended on it, still wearing the same clothes I'd slept in, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might. When I reached the maternity ward, I could hear crying, not the baby but Sarah. Through the window of room 314 I saw her holding this tiny, perfect little human. My daughter. Emma Grace had a full head of dark hair just like Sarah's and these impossibly small fingers that were already wrapped around Sarah's thumb. Mrs. Chen was there, and Emma, and Sarah's sister Amy. A whole support system I'd forfeited the right to be part of when I chose Lisa over my family. I stood outside that room for an hour just watching them. Watching Sarah sing softly to our daughter. Watching her count tiny toes and whisper promises about that they'd build together. Watching a woman I'd called incapable prove she was stronger than I'd ever be. When the nurse finally noticed me lurking in the hallway, she asked if I was family. I opened my mouth to say yes, but Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. He's the father, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Sarah, he's here. The room went quiet except for the soft sounds Emma Grace made. Sarah looked at me through the glass, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, not anger, but complete indifference. Like I was just another stranger who'd wandered into her story. Can come in, she said quietly. She should meet her father. Walking into that room felt like entering a church where I'd committed some unforgivable sin. Sarah looked exhausted but radiant, like she'd just accomplished the most important thing she'd ever do. Our daughter was perfect, tiny and pink, and completely unaware that her father was a coward. Do you want to hold her? Sarah asked. When she placed Emma Grace in my arms, I understood every cliché about fatherhood in an instant. She was so small, so trusting, looking at me with these dark eyes that seemed to see straight through all my lies and excuses to the man I could have been. I started crying right there in front of everyone. Not quiet tears, but gasping sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't know it existed. This was my daughter, and I'd already failed her before she was even born. I'm so sorry, I whispered to Sarah. I'm so sorry for everything. Sarah's voice was steady, almost clinical. I know. But sorry doesn't change anything, does it? I held Emma Grace for 20 minutes while Sarah's family pretended I wasn't falling apart. When I finally handed her back, Sarah had that look again, like she was studying me for signs of who I might become. Mrs. Chen told me about new living situation. She said, I need to know for planning to be part of Emma's or not. I can't have drifting in and out when it's convenient. This was it. The moment where I could choose to be the father Emma Grace deserved. Or walk away and let Sarah build without the cows I brought everywhere I went. I should have chosen Emma Grace. Should have ended things with Lisa, gotten my own place, figured out how to be a co-parent with the woman I'd betrayed. Should have fought for the chance to be better. Instead I heard saying, I need some time to figure things out. The disappointment on Sarah's face wasn't surprise or anger, it was confirmation. She'd expected exactly this response from me, and I delivered it right on schedule. Okay, she said, adjusting Emma Grace's blanket. Take all the time need. We'll be fine. Not we'll wait, or we'll see. Just we'll be fine, with the unspoken without, in the air like a verdict. I left the hospital at sunrise, drove back to Lisa's apartment, and pretended my hadn't just changed forever. Lisa was making coffee when I walked in, already dressed for work like nothing had happened. She took one look at my face and sighed. So saw them both. I held my daughter. And Lisa's voice was sharp, impatient, like my emotional breakdown was an inconvenience in her Tuesday morning routine. And what? Are gonna keep torturing over this? Because I'm getting pretty tired of competing with ex-fiancé and now her baby. Her baby. Not our baby, not my daughter, her baby. Like Emma Grace was some prop Sarah had used to manipulate me. That's when I finally saw Lisa clearly. Not the successful, confident woman who'd rescued me from my failing relationship, but someone who'd built her happiness on the wreckage of someone else's. Someone who could look at a newborn baby and see only competition. She's my daughter too, I said quietly. She. Because last time I checked, walked away from that situation months ago. Chose us, remember? Chose this pawn. She was right, I had chosen. I'd chosen Lisa's apartment over Sarah's loyalty, chosen feeling wanted over being needed, chosen the easy path over the right one. But holding Emma Grace had changed something fundamental in me. For 20 minutes I'd felt what it was like to be truly necessary to another human being. Not just wanted or desired but essential. That baby needed me to be better than I'd ever been. And I was already failing her. The next few months were the worst of my. I tried to visit Emma Grace twice a week, but every interaction with was strained and formal. She was polite, never kept me from seeing my daughter, but she treated me like a distant relative, someone she had to tolerate for Emma's sake. Emma Grace was perfect. She had Sarah's eyes and what looked like my stubborn chin. She'd grab my finger and hold on like she was trying to tell me something important. Every time I had to leave it felt like tearing off a piece of my soul. But I'd go home to Lisa's apartment, and she'd find ways to make me feel guilty for caring too much. Little comments about how much time I was spending over there. How Sarah was probably just using the baby to get me back. How I needed to focus on our future instead of living in the past. The breaking point came when Emma Grace was 4 months old. I'd bought her a little stuffed elephant, and I was excited to give it to her during my Thursday visit. When I got to Sarah's apartment she was packing boxes. We're moving, she said before I could ask. I got a job offer in Portland. Better pay, better benefits, closer to my cousin who has kids Emma's age. Portland, 12 take her miles away. I said, panic rising in my chest. I'm not taking her away from Jake. We're never really here to begin with. Sarah was right and we both knew it. I'd been showing twice a week like I was checking a box, playing at being a father while living with another woman, giving Emma Grace just enough attention to ease my conscience but not enough to actually be present in her. The custody arrangement will still stand, Sarah continued, folding tiny clothes into a box. Can visit whenever want, call as much as want. But I can't keep organizing my around someone who isn't sure if he wants to be part of it. I wanted to her. Wanted to hire a lawyer, demand she stay, insist on my rights as Emma's father. But what rights did I really have? I wasn't on the birth certificate because I'd been too scared to sign it. I'd never changed a diaper, never gotten for a 3M feeding, never been there when Emma was sick or scared or just needed her dad. I was a stranger who happened to share DNA with this perfect little person. When are leaving? I asked. Next month. That night I sat in my car outside Sarah's building for 3 hours, trying to work the courage to go upstairs and beg her not to leave. To promise I'd be better, more present, more reliable. To tell her I'd leave Lisa and get my own place and learn how to be the father Emma Grace deserved. But I already knew the truth Sarah had figured out months ago. I wasn't capable of being that man. Not because I didn't love my daughter, but because I'd proven over and over that when things got difficult, I chose the easy path. Sarah moved to Portland on a rainy Tuesday in October. I drove to the airport to say goodbye, carrying that stuffed elephant I'd never gotten to give Emma Grace. At the gate, Sarah let me hold my daughter one more time. Emma was bigger now, more aware, and she stared at me with those serious dark eyes like she was trying to memorize my face. I'll visit, I promised Sarah. I'll call every day, I'll be part of her. Sarah nodded, but we both knew I was lying again. Portland was expensive to visit. Lisa had made it clear she wouldn't support my obsession with my ex's baby, and I'd proven repeatedly that when faced with choosing between comfort and commitment, I chose comfort every time. Take care of Jake. Sarah, as they called her boarding group. Emma Grace deserves better than half a father, and deserved better than half a. I watched them disappear down the jetway, my daughter's tiny hand waving goodbye over Sarah's shoulder, and I knew I'd never see either of them again. That was 8 months ago. I called twice in the first week, but the time difference made it complicated, and Lisa would get annoyed when I disappeared to talk to them during dinner or our weekend plans. After a month the calls became weekly. Then monthly, then not at all. I sent money once, $500 I scraped together from working overtime. Sarah sent it back with a note that just said, Emma Grace needs consistency, not guilt payments. Last week Lisa broke with me. Turns out she'd been seeing someone else for 3 months, a partner at her firm who doesn't come with baggage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I destroyed my family for a woman who discarded me the moment something better came along. So here I am alone in a studio apartment that cost more than Sarah and I used to pay for our whole place, working a job I, estranged from the daughter I'll never know and the woman who was too good for me from the beginning. I get updates sometimes through social media. Emma Grace is walking now, babbling in what looks like full sentences. She has Sarah's smile and this mop of curly hair that makes her look like a little wildflower. In the latest photo she's sitting in a sandbox at some Portland park, covered in sand and looking deliriously happy. She doesn't know she has a father, and that's probably for the best. Sarah looks happy too, tired because single parenting is exhausting, but genuinely happy in a way she never looked with me. Not even in our best moments. She's building the she always deserved, just without the man who was supposed to help her build it. I think about the land I sold sometimes, my grandfather's 40 acres that were supposed to be Emma Grace's inheritance. I traded my family's future for 8 months with a man who loved me like a son, and then I away the family part anyway. If I could go back, if I could change anything, it wouldn't be selling the land. That was the one good thing I did in this whole story. It would be staying. Staying when Sarah called me incapable. Staying when the money ran out. Staying when things got hard and scary and uncertain. I would have stayed and figured it out together, the way people who actually love each other do, but don't get to go back, just get to live with what chose, and what chose lives with the consequences of who really were when it mattered most. I was incapable. Not of working hard or making money or building a, but of being the man who stays. The man who chooses love over comfort, commitment over validation, his family over his wounded pride. Sarah was right about me from the beginning. And my daughter will grow never knowing that the reason she doesn't have a father isn't because I didn't love her, but because I love more. That's the truth I have to carry now, in this empty apartment, with this empty, knowing that somewhere in Portland, my daughter is taking her first steps toward a future I'll never be part of.